So one of the questions that I hear a lot is basically, what books would you recommend that I read? And I really understand this question because there's so many books out there and you can't afford to buy them all. And it's kind of risky to, if you don't have a lot of money, to spend money on a book and then have it turn out not to be that great. So you usually want to hear what's good from other people before you spend your money on a book. And so I thought that I could help with this. There are several books that I'd recommend for lots of different topics within the church, and so I thought I'd make a video about it. So I hope that you find this helpful. I'll try to divide this up into different topics so you can skip ahead if you're only interested in a certain one. So hope this helps. So the first group of books that I'm going to show you are books for Protestants. These are books that are written by, I think they're all written by converts to the Catholic faith from Protestant denominations. So they really understand where Protestants are coming from. And they really understand what they're thinking about, what kinds of concerns they have, and how to explain it in a way that they're going to understand. So the first book that I recommend is Rome Sweet Home by Scott and Kimberly Hahn. And this was the first book that I read as a Protestant. And this is really what kickstarted my interest in the faith and really got me starting to research about it and learn more. And if you're curious about how on earth I as a Protestant started reading this book, you'll have to go to my longer video of how I became a Catholic convert, and you can check out my story. But I will say that this book is very helpful and very challenging to a Protestant. It's not necessarily going to answer all of their questions. When I read this book, I found I had way more questions at the end of it than I did at the beginning. But it will help to challenge some of the misconceptions that Catholics have about, or that Protestants have about Catholics, and it will challenge some of their ideas and teachings that they've been holding to. They'll start to just kind of wonder a little bit, and this book is just really good for sparking that curiosity. This book would also be really good for a Catholic that's just interested in understanding a little bit more about Protestants and why they see the church the way that they see it, and also just want to learn a little bit more about their faith and be inspired by a pretty amazing couple. So this book is definitely recommended. The next book that I recommend is this book, What Catholics Really Believe by Carl Keating. This is a good book, mostly because it's very organized, and that really helps. It has 52 answers to common misconceptions about the Catholic faith. So if you're looking for straightforward answers to different questions that Protestants have about Catholicism, this is a really good way to go. You can just go straight to the question that you have, look it up, and kind of work from there. It'll give you a little start to understanding the Catholic answer to different topics. So that's a really good book. The next book that I want to recommend, I don't actually have a copy of anymore. I think it was written by Dave Armstrong, and it was called The Biblical Evidence for Catholicism, or something like that. It's been years since I read it, but I think I lent it to my mom back when I was idealistic enough to think that she might be convinced, as I was. But I don't know what happened to that book now. But yeah, that was a really good book. And especially for a Protestant that is really well versed in Scripture, this would be a good one. It really gives a good basis for the scriptural defense of Catholic teaching. This is also really good for any Catholic to read, especially if they're ever going to be talking to Protestants. Pretty much anything you say, if it doesn't come from Scripture, is going to be futile. So it's really good to know the scriptural defense for what you believe. So that was Dave Armstrong was the author of that one, I think. Lastly, there's just this little book called This Is My Body by Mark Shea, I don't know how you pronounce it. And this book, I read it a long time ago, and I don't remember a lot. But the nice thing about this book is that it's very focused on just one topic. and it's about the Eucharist. And it's nice because it's short, it's little, it's not a huge investment. So if anyone's just like even slightly curious about the Eucharist, this is a pretty good book because they can just pick it up and read it in a couple of hours. And it will really challenge them to rethink the Eucharist and what it means and why we believe what it is. So this is also a good book. Another topic that you might be interested in is church history. And church history is, well, that's also a really good topic for Protestants. But it's good for everyone to know. It's good to know where you come from, and it also really helps you to find the basis for a lot of what our teachings are, find the historical value of them, where they come from, and that they're not just new, and that there's really a solid foundation for everything that we believe. So the book that I recommend on church history is called Church History, From Christ to Pre-Reformation. And this is written by Everett Ferguson. And Everett Ferguson is not Catholic. I got this book when I was just starting to be curious about Catholicism. And I think I had read Rome Sweet Home and started to wonder about church history and, where did all these teachings come from and what was the early church really like. And so I decided to get a book on church history, but I didn't want to get a book written by a Catholic. That was one of my rules, because I thought that it would be too much bias in it if I bought a Catholic book. So I specifically picked one written by a Protestant. I think he's from Church of Christ, maybe. I'm not sure. But this is a textbook, basically, that they use in seminary, in Protestant seminaries even. And even though this is written by a Protestant, it still convinced me of Catholicism in the end quite a bit. Not everything in this book is perfect. Sometimes he puts his own anecdotes in here that aren't necessarily Catholic friendly. But if you're careful to pick out the difference between the facts and the opinions, this is a really good book for the facts, and he mostly sticks to the facts. So this book is so good. I underlined everywhere in this book. I used to read it till like 2 a.m. I was so fascinated. So there's a sequel to this book as well I have never read, but probably it's also good. But mostly what I recommend for church history is the primary resources. So if you study history at all in school, you'll learn a little bit about primary and secondary resources. This would be an example of a secondary resource. This is something that someone else compiled and put together to explain what we know about church history. Here are some primary resources, and this is where if you really want to do the research yourself, this is where you want to go. So this is a collection by, you can see the name, William A. Jurgens. And this is a collection of writings from the early church fathers. And it's just purely their writings in full. They're not split up. They're not, just taking different quotations out. So you don't have to worry about things being out of context. You have the full, writings that we have available from the early church fathers. So if you really want to know what the early church was teaching and what they were like, what they were doing, you can hear it from their own voices here in this book. This is volume 1. This is the one that I really have read the most of. This one covers through the Nicene era. So this is from the very beginning to about the year 300 something. Then there's also volume 2, which covers the next 300 years or so, and volume 3, which covers the next 300 years or so. It's kind of expensive to get the whole set, and I did get the whole set because it was worth it enough to me. But really, if you're really curious just about the early church, you want to know what the earliest teachings were, which is what I really wanted to know, this book is pretty sufficient. I haven't actually done that much study in these other books. Mostly just later on if I'm interested in looking at other stuff. But as far as really learning, it's this is the way to go. So I really recommend this. It's probably, of all the books I'm going to recommend today, this is the one that I most recommend. For books specifically about the Eucharist, my top recommendation is another book by Scott Hahn called The Lamb's Supper. And I've heard a lot of people recommend this book, so I know it's not just me who really loves it. This book would also be a really good one for a Protestant to read. It explains a lot of what we believe about the Eucharist and the Mass. And also it makes a lot of sense out of the book of Revelation, if you can believe it. This is just a great book for anyone to read, and I would highly recommend it. Then also for the Eucharist, I'm just going to mention this one again. This is the book by Mark Shea, which also covers what the Eucharist is and explains it from a way that a Protestant is going to be able to relate to. For books about Mary, my top recommendation is again by Scott Hahn. He just writes a lot of really good books that Protestants especially can understand. This book is called Hail, Holy Queen, and I didn't read this book until really recently, actually. But I wish I had read it a long time ago, because a lot of what I read in this book is stuff that I've discovered slowly over time and picked up as I've gone. But if I had read this years ago, I would have not struggled for so long to understand Catholic teaching about Mary. This is a really good one. It will really help you to learn about Mary and to really develop a devotion to her. Another book about Mary, well, it's about the Rosary actually, but I consider that sort of a Marian topic, is this book called The Rosary by Gary Wills. And now, disclaimer is I've heard from people that Gary Wills is a sort of controversial person. I've never read anything else by him, so I guess you should maybe be careful about other books by Gary Wills, but this book I have read and I really like it. It helps to explain a little bit of the history of the Rosary and has just sort of a meditation on the different mysteries that you meditate on in the Rosary. So it'll help you understand not necessarily so much about Mary herself. The other book by Scott Hahn is better for that, but a little bit of what some of our popular devotion to Mary is about and where it came from. Some books about more general Catholic teaching or broader overviews of Catholic teaching that are really in-depth. This one probably will not surprise you, but the Catechism of the Catholic Church. This obviously is very comprehensive, covers a lot of topics. It's really thick. It will take you a long time. I have to admit I have not read everything, but I would really like to really do more of a study of the Catechism. But I have definitely used it as a reference tool a lot, especially when I was trying to learn about Catholicism. It will really help you to understand what church teaching is. It's not an apologetics book, so it's not going to necessarily defend everything that it says, but it will help you know what Catholic teaching actually is, and then you can go out and try to understand more about it. So I think every Catholic should have this on their bookshelf and reference it often. Another resource that is not actually a book, but a set of DVDs, is this DVD set called Catholicism. And this is made by Word on Fire. It's a ministry led by Father Robert Barron, if you've heard of him. He has really good YouTube videos as well, if you're interested in looking those up. I think his channel is called Word on Fire. These are expensive, so I sort of splurged to buy this. But I'm sort of a fan of Father Robert Barron, so I really wanted to get them, and they've really been worth the money, actually. I've loved them so much. It's just a really visual overview of the Catholic faith, and he travels all around the world and shows you Catholicism in different places, and it's really amazing, really well done. Definitely recommend it. I watched actually a lot of these episodes with my former roommate, who was raised without really any religious education. So I will say that I had to pause it a lot and explain a lot of things to her that she didn't understand. So for someone who's not Catholic, it could be a little confusing, actually, unless you have sort of an idea about Catholicism. For someone who knows nothing about Catholicism, they'll find it fascinating, they'll love it, but they might have to end up doing a lot of research to really understand it all. But it's great. It's great for sharing, too. For some reason, it's a lot easier to watch a DVD with someone than it is to lend them a book and talk about it later. So this is a great tool for evangelism. It also has a book that goes with it. I don't have the book. I haven't actually seen it. But I think the book covers everything that's in here and maybe explains some of those things more. So the book I would probably also recommend it, even though I haven't actually seen it. So I decided to include a section called Christianity, and by that I just mean books that defend Christianity as a whole and are not necessarily specific to Catholicism. And you'll see, if I show you, one of the books that I recommend here is Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. And C.S. Lewis was not actually Catholic, but he didn't deviate from Catholicism very far. And this book is loved by people of all sorts of Christian denominations, including Catholicism. It's really a very good book. And I have to recommend this one because it's really good for sharing with people who have questions about Christianity in general, maybe not specifically Catholicism. And you can share this and they'll really start to get an understanding of Christianity. And it can just really help to find that common ground between you and Protestants. So reading this book is something, if you're talking to a Protestant later, you can talk about this book and really relate and find out how much common ground you have. And it's really good, I think, for everyone to read this book and have that in common. It's just a really good book. Everything by C.S. Lewis is pretty good. Another book is Orthodoxy by G.K. Chesterton. And G.K. Chesterton, I think I've heard from other people that he's sort of an acquired taste, but I love him. He has just sort of a sense of humor that not everybody appreciates, but he can be a little bit tough and sarcastic at times, I suppose. But he's really good, and he's very logical, and I really enjoyed reading this book, Orthodoxy. G.K. Chesterton was a convert to Catholicism, but he doesn't really write. I think he wrote this actually before he became Catholic, maybe. So he doesn't really write about the Catholic Church specifically, but more how he came to accept Orthodox Christianity, Orthodox teaching of Christianity in general. So this is just another book that's kind of like Mere Christianity that you can share with people of other denominations that have that common ground. And it's just a very enriching book. I also have The Everlasting Man by G.K. Chesterton. I haven't actually read this one yet. Planning to read it, but I've also heard that that's a really good one. I also wanted to share a book about natural family planning, which is probably one of the most controversial aspects of our faith. And this book actually isn't really a defense of natural family planning, and more just an explanation of how to go about doing it. But it's called Taking Charge of Your Fertility by Toni Weschler, if that's how you say her name. And I don't know if she's Catholic or not, actually. She writes this book from just a very neutral point of view. It's not religious in nature, but it really just explains a lot about how natural family planning works, and explains a lot about the human body. And I think that it's really a good book, especially if you might want to share with someone who's not Catholic, or if someone who's not Catholic wants to understand what someone might be motivated to do this just based on natural reasons, not even theologically based. It's a very, very helpful book, very friendly book. It's not going to make anyone really angry. So I think this is just a really good one, a good resource, and a good way to show how natural family planning can be very good, and a lot of people like it, not just Catholics. So definitely recommend this one if you're interested in that. I also wanted to include a section on Bibles, which might be surprising. But there are a lot of different versions of the Bible, different translations that you can use, and most of the translations out there are Protestant. They miss the Catholic books in the Old Testament that were taken out by Martin Luther and the Reformers. So you want to make sure that you get a Catholic translation if you want to have those books. Protestant translations are fine as well, just as long as you realize that you're missing some books, and you probably want at least one copy of those books. But there are even different Catholic translations. So what translations I have, this is the New American Bible. It's a really good translation. It's pretty easy to understand. I think it's pretty faithful to the original text. A lot of people really have good things to say about this translation, and it's pretty easy to read. But I would also recommend the Douay-Rheims. I don't actually know how you pronounce that. And it might be a little bit crazy to read this one because it's not that easy to understand. It's written in pretty old English. It's a lot like the King James. They were actually translated around the same time. The Douay-Rheims is actually a little bit older than the King James, I believe. But I really like it. It's really beautiful. So if you're looking for translation of scripture that's a little bit higher language, a little bit more beautiful language, then the Douay-Rheims is really good as well. But I always recommend have as many translations of the Bible as you can, and if you're really interested in finding out what a verse means, you can read multiple translations and really explore that way. So. Some books on the saints that I recommend. First, this is written by G.K. Chesterton, and this is actually 2 books in one. I think you can buy them separately as 2 books as well. But this is St. Thomas Aquinas and St. Francis of Assisi. And these are 2 saints that are really very different, but both very inspiring. And so it's actually kind of neat to have them together as one set, because they're just very different people, but both very holy, and they lived both amazing lives. I really enjoyed reading this book. I always like G.K. Chesterton, so I have to recommend this one. I also have this book, Kateri Tekakwitha by Evelyn M. Brown. And this book is good. This is about my confirmation saint, Kateri, and it's really good. It's very informative. It'll teach you a lot about Kateri. I remember, though, as I was reading it, that sometimes it kind of felt a little bit hard on the Native Americans. I don't know if that makes sense. So I have a few reservations, I guess, about this book. But it taught me a lot about Kateri, and her story is very inspiring. So I still recommend it. This book I recommend completely. This is Story of a Soul by St. Therese of Lisieux. And this is really great because you don't often get to read an actual autobiography written by a saint. Here, it's not someone else writing the story of her life, it's her writing her own story. And with a lot of saints, sometimes when people write their biographies for them, they won't include the more human sides of them. Sometimes they'll just seem so magical and inhuman when other people write their stories. But the way that Therese writes her story is just, you can relate to it so much, especially as a girl. I think especially as a girl you can relate to this book. She's just so honest and real, and just you feel like you know her really well by the end of the story, and she's very, very inspiring. Then there's also this book, The 7-Story Mountain by Thomas Merton. And Thomas Merton is not actually a saint, but I think he's been declared blessed, worthy of learning about. And this story, I read this actually while I was still a Protestant, and actually I got it from the library and returned it, and so it's been years since I have read it, but I saw it at the store not that long ago, and I picked it up because I want to read it again. And it's basically the story of his conversion and his spiritual journey through his life, and he also has just a really amazing story. And speaking of Thomas Merton, I have several books by Thomas Merton that I also would like to recommend. One book I don't actually have because I lent it to a friend. That one is called No Man is an Island, and that's a really good book. There's also New Seeds of Contemplation, which is very similar. So I would say probably you'd only need to get one of the two because they're actually very similar to each other. New Seeds of Contemplation, I think, is a little bit more in depth, maybe, and No Man is an Island is a little bit more approachable. So I think I would recommend No Man is an Island first, as a good way to, the first thing that you would read from Thomas Merton. It's very, very, very good about a lot of the virtues and the spiritual life and contemplation. You can also get really amazing collections of Thomas Merton's writings. He has all sorts of shorter essays and books and things like that, and I just really recommend anything Thomas Merton. He's really inspired me a lot in my faith. So you see anything that says Thomas Merton on it, I recommend it. And I almost forgot, The Imitation of Christ by Thomas à Kempis, which I can't find because I was just reading it the other day and I don't know where I put it. It's also one of the best books you'll ever read. Everyone should read that book. That could also go in just the Christianity section. It's very approachable to people of all sorts of different denominations, and it's just very, very good for anyone to read. And finally, the last section is Catholic Living. These are books that are just sort of to help you get integrated into living your Catholic faith in the day-to-day and in your home. So the first one is called The Catholic Home. This is written by, what is her name? Meredith Gould, and she's actually a convert to the faith from Judaism. And she writes about the church calendar and the different feasts that we have and how you can celebrate them, how you can integrate Catholicism into your home and your day-to-day life. And I really enjoyed reading this, and I try to incorporate more and more of this into my day-to-day life. Then there's also the Feast Day Cookbook. This is a book of recipes for different feast days based on the old calendar. This is actually a book from like 1950 that's been reprinted, and I really enjoy this. I really enjoy all the different old celebrations of the feast days that a lot of people don't really know about anymore, but they're really fun, and it's great to learn about it. And you can sort of start to bring Catholicism back into your everyday life, and even in the little menial tasks that you do, like making lunch. You can make a feast of your faith out of lunch. So yeah, that's all the books that I recommend. Unless I've forgotten some, I might end up adding something in the comments. But yeah, if you have other books that you would recommend, share them in the comments, and I'm sure people who are looking at this, looking for books, will go through and look through them and also look for your recommendations. So I hope you find this helpful, and God bless.